Hello, this is Jack Sample, and this is my Module 1 presentation for EDL 850. A little bit of personal information about me. I've been married for 4 years. This is my wife Katie and I at the Grand Canyon. And we have a sweet little boy named Arthur. There he is right there. He's a lot of fun. He's 18 months. I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. I went through K through 12 to Turner, graduated from there in 2008, and then I went to Emporia State for my bachelor's, and I graduated in 2013. I also have a master's from there as well. My hobbies, I love to camp, play video games occasionally, and I've also gotten into Dungeons and Dragons lately. I'm kind of a nerd, but I try to keep it in check and keep that tone down a little bit. It's a good time, but sometimes I don't have enough time for that. My work environment and work history. I have taught adaptive special education. This is my 7th year doing that. I spent my first 3 years at Wyandotte High School, where there were 13 adaptive special education teachers and 200 adaptive special education students. Wow. The population was about 1,600, so that's about an eighth of the population. And now this is my 4th year at Piper High School in Kansas City, Kansas. I enjoyed a lot. I feel part of the team, and I've loved it. 4 years, and I don't see myself going anywhere anytime soon. We just added a 4th adaptive special education teacher to our staff. And we have around 75 adaptive special education students. Transition. So, getting into it, we are going to look at the different levels of government and what they do for public education. The local side of it, see right now we have elective school boards for districts are in charge of curriculum, hiring personnel, and deciding when schools need to be consolidated, closed, and constructed. Mainly, the Board of Education for each district kind of makes these decisions. That's why you see the quality of education might differ greatly from district to district, no matter how close they are. Also, school boards are in charge of funding, and they do that. They make up about roughly 50% of their school district's funding through property taxes. At the state level, the state government usually delegates a lot of the authority to school districts. They can take that back, though, but they will check to see that the district's Board of Education is doing their job. They provide a little bit under half of the school's operating cost, and many state governments establish additional educational standards for certain subjects. So the state of Kansas might say you need this many years of foreign language, or they want you to have at least 1 credit of fine arts instead of a half credit, things like that. And on the federal side, they usually provide funding to public schools, and this is usually tied in with rules and regulations. You have to do certain things to receive that funding and have it available each and every year. Also, they provide only about 8% of the funding. I figured that out, and that was a little wild. I thought there was more, but apparently it's mostly state and local government. They support student achievement and access through various acts and programs, like IDEA and free and appropriate education. All of that is the federal government, and that's a great thing, making sure that education is accessible for all students, no matter their disability, race, gender, anything. They want to provide that free education. Support schools through federal laws and guidance pertaining to workplace discrimination and workplace situations. The employment standards actually falls into the school districts as well, and so they want to make sure that everybody's supported in that aspect. and supports educational research pertaining to the quality of the national education system. So mainly, they really look into like research trends and what would be best, what's the new thing that will help school districts around the United States be their best for student achievement. And this is where we have seen, different acts like No Child Left Behind and things like that. So who's in charge? For the local government, usually it's the elected Board of Education members. This is a volunteer position. These members elect a superintendent, and usually that's a big district decision as well. There's a lot of vetting that goes on with that process to select a superintendent. Superintendent acts as the CEO of the school district and works in collaboration with the Board of Education a lot. They hold a lot of power over public education at a very direct level. And that's mainly because, they're in charge of establishing that curriculum. They have the final say on hiring personnel. While principals and superintendents are able to do that, the board can veto that at any time. Usually they don't because they trust their administrators, but, this is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, they collect local property taxes within district boundaries to help supplement funding. At the state level, the elected State Board of Education members is a volunteer position. They have the oversight, pretty much making sure that Common Core standards are being followed. They establish additional standards for some subjects, like we talked about, maybe a couple of years of foreign language here and there and things like that. And they pass laws governing school practices. And so they just pretty much make sure that districts are doing what they need to do to make students as successful as possible, while they delegate a lot of the responsibility to the local government. They also have the power to revoke that as well. Then we have the governor. It's Laura Kelly right now in Kansas. She helps implement laws governing school practices, and she also gives advisement for budget within education. She can make some general mandates, but the Board of Education also can overturn those. We saw that in the school. Governor Kelly thought it would be better to wait until Labor Day, after Labor Day, to start schools, and the Board of Education said no, it should be up to the districts. Again, that's another way of showing that the state government is delegating power to the local government. So the state level government holds a lot of power, possibly the most. I feel like a lot of things within the local government is important, and the Board of Education makes a lot of decisions, but I think that's only because the state government gives them that ability and that delegation. And so who's in charge at the federal level? The U.S. Department of Education. These are paid positions. They collect data on public schools, evaluate performances of those public schools, suggest policy changes, and measure the outcomes. They're constantly doing that research we talked about earlier. The Secretary of Education is a cabinet member for the president. Right now, the president is Donald Trump, and the current Secretary of Education is Betsy DeVos. They work with the Department of Education to focus on key budget and policy proposals. Of course, the U.S. Department of Education has a certain agenda, and sometimes the Secretary of Education will try to maneuver that agenda in a direction that they see beneficial for the students in the United States. While this might be the bigger picture of education, really, we have these blanket policies and laws, it really does have the least impact directly with schools. And just the research and everything, state and local governments really hold true to having the most power. So most influence for each component. So component 6.1 is really focused on evaluating, developing, and implementing management, communication, technology, and school level governance. The key word there is school level, and I think local government board of education has a lot to do with that. I think they have the most influence for this component. And if you'll see right here, and operation systems that support student learning needs and promote the mission and vision of the school. That to me really speaks truly to local government, that board of education, knowing what's best for the district. And that's why you see how different districts are, even if they're in the same city or anything like that. It is very different if you go from district to district. Component 6.2, evaluate, develop, and advocate for data-informed and equitable resourcing plan that supports school improvement and student development. This really screams state government has the most influence for that. And that's mainly because that equitable resourcing plan really makes me look at how they are going to give money to school districts to follow a budget. And they give almost half of, the school district funding. So I know that the state level of government really does a lot of data-informed decisions, and I can see them being the most influential in this component. Component 6.3, reflectively evaluate, communicate about, and implement laws, rights, policies, and regulations to promote student and adult success and well-being. To me, this really has federal government written all over it. Laws, rights, policies, they are making sure that we are going to do our best to make an equitable opportunity for each and every student that walks into a public school building. Supporting educational success and well-being for students and adults. How do these all work together to make this happen? Each level of government promotes educational success and well-being for the students. The federal government role should be to ensure information is available to successfully evaluate a school system and to build capacity for continuous improvement. Mainly that's saying that they're going to make sure that school districts and state governments have the best resources available to know what is a good school. And that's where all that research from the federal government side of it comes in. The state government role is to oversee Common Core curriculum and establish additional standards for certain subjects. Also, this level passes laws for governing school practices. Really, they have a lot of power, and they make sure that school districts in their state are doing the best they can for students to be successful. And they give a lot of power to the local school districts, but of course they will step in and make sure those are being followed. Next, we have the local government, and their role is more specific to the school district. The Board of Education can adapt policies as deemed appropriate for them to maintain, develop, and operate local public schools. I actually grabbed this from my Board of Education's policy manual.